On a freezing Christmas Eve in Seoul, 9 months pregnant and bleeding through her coat, Selena Vale was thrown into the street by the husband she thought loved her. No money, no family, just a suitcase and the baby kicking inside her ribs. In desperation, she sent one last message to a number she swore she'd never use, a man whose name made criminals go quiet. Jun Hae-jin answered, and when he found her collapsed in the snow, everything changed. This is the story of a woman with nothing left to lose and the king who refused to let her fall. Drop a like, comment your city below, and stay until the end. You won't believe where this goes. The cold hit Selena like a fist. She stumbled forward, one hand braced against her swollen belly, the other dragging a cheap suitcase across the icy pavement. Snow fell in thick, wet clumps, clinging to her hair, her eyelashes, soaking through the thin coat she'd grabbed on her way out. Her breath came in short, ragged gasps, each one burning her lungs. Behind her, the apartment door slammed shut with a finality that rattled through her bones. "Don't come back!" Minho's voice cut through the night, shrill and venomous. "You hear me? You're done!" Selena didn't turn around. She couldn't. If she looked back, she'd see him standing there in the warm glow of the doorway with her, the woman he'd been sleeping with for months, the woman whose perfume still clung to his shirts, the woman who wasn't 9 months pregnant and useless. Her foot hit a patch of ice and she went down hard, landing on her knees. Pain shot up her thighs. The suitcase tipped over, spilling open, clothes, a hairbrush, a single photograph of her mother tumbling into the snow. "Get up," she whispered to herself. "Get up, get up, get up." But her body wouldn't cooperate. The baby shifted inside her, pressing against her ribs, and a sharp cramp seized her lower back. Not now. Not tonight. She wasn't due for another week, maybe 2. The doctor said she had time. The doctor also said she needed rest, proper meals, someone to take care of her. Selena almost laughed. Almost. She forced herself upright, ignoring the way her knees screamed in protest, and started shoving her things back into the suitcase. Her hands were shaking so hard she could barely grip the zipper. Around her, Seoul's Christmas lights twinkled in the distance, cheerful reds and golds and greens that made her want to scream. Merry fucking Christmas. She checked her phone. 3 missed calls from his mother, 2 texts from his brother. Nothing from anyone who actually gave a damn about her. She scrolled through her contacts, past names she barely recognized anymore. Friends who drifted away when Minho started controlling who she could see. Cousins back in the States who hadn't spoken to her since the wedding. Then she stopped. Jun Hae-jin. Her thumb hovered over the name. She'd saved the number 6 months ago, back when Minho was still pretending to be a decent husband. Back when she'd gone to that business dinner and met a man who looked at her like she was something other than furniture. He'd handed her his card, told her if she ever needed help, real help, she should call. She never planned to. But standing there in the snow with nowhere to go and a baby about to tear its way out of her, Selena realized she was out of options. She typed quickly before she could talk herself out of it. "I need help, please." Then she hit send. For a long moment, nothing happened. The snow kept falling. A car passed by, honking at her to get out of the street. She stared at her phone screen, watching the message sit there unread, and felt something cold settle in her chest. He wasn't going to answer. Why would he? She was nobody. A pregnant woman he'd met once at a dinner party probably didn't even remember her face. Her phone buzzed. "Where are you?" Selena's breath caught. She typed out the street name with trembling fingers, then added, "I'm sorry. I didn't know who else to call." The response came almost instantly. "Stay where you are. I'm coming." She wanted to cry. She wanted to sit down in the snow and sob until there was nothing left inside her. But she didn't. She couldn't afford to break. Not yet. So she dragged her suitcase to the nearest building overhang and waited, arms wrapped around herself, trying to keep warm. The contractions started 10 minutes later. At first, she thought it was just another cramp, the same sharp, twisting pain that had been plaguing her for weeks. But then it came again, harder this time, radiating from her lower back all the way around to her stomach. She doubled over, gripping the edge of the suitcase, and tried to breathe through it. Not now, not here. Her phone buzzed again. 5 minutes. She didn't answer. She couldn't. The pain was stealing her breath, making her vision blur at the edges. She pressed a hand to her belly and felt the baby moving, restless and insistent, like it knew something was wrong. "Just hold on," she whispered. "Please, baby, just hold on a little longer." Headlights cut through the snow. A black sedan pulled up to the curb, sleek and expensive, the kind of car that didn't belong in this part of the city. The back door opened and a man stepped out, tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a dark coat that probably cost more than Selena's entire wardrobe. His face was sharp, all clean lines and cold precision, but his eyes softened the moment they landed on her. June Hae-jin. He crossed the distance between them in 3 long strides, not bothering with pleasantries. "Can you walk?" Selena tried to answer, but another contraction hit and all that came out was a choked gasp. June's jaw tightened. He didn't ask again. He just scooped her up like she weighed nothing, one arm under her knees, the other braced against her back. She wanted to protest, wanted to tell him she could manage on her own, but the warmth of his body against hers was too good to fight. "The suitcase. I'll get it." He carried her to the car and set her down carefully in the back seat, then went back for her things. Selena slumped against the leather, trying to catch her breath. The driver, a stone-faced man in his 40s, didn't even glance at her. He just waited until June slid in beside her, then pulled away from the curb without a word. June's hand found hers in the dark. His grip was firm, steady, grounding. "How far apart are the contractions?" "I don't know." Her voice came out hoarse, barely above a whisper. 10 minutes, maybe? They just started. We're going to the hospital." "No." The word came out sharper than she meant it to. "No hospitals. They'll call Minho. He's listed as my emergency contact. He'll what?" Selena looked at June and saw something dangerous flicker behind his eyes. Something cold and controlled and absolutely ruthless. "He'll take the baby," she said quietly. "He doesn't want me, but he'll take her. His family will make sure of it." June was silent for a moment, his thumb tracing slow circles against the back of her hand. Then he leaned forward and spoke to the driver in rapid Korean, too fast for Selena to follow. The driver nodded and changed direction. "Where are we going?" "Somewhere safe." June settled back against the seat, his eyes never leaving her face. "You're not going back to him, Selena. Not tonight. Not ever." She wanted to argue, wanted to tell him he didn't understand, that Minho had connections, money, lawyers who could twist the truth until black looked white. But another contraction stole her breath, and all she could do was squeeze June's hand and try not to scream. The drive took 20 minutes, though it felt like hours. By the time they pulled up to a sleek high-rise in Gangnam, Selena was drenched in sweat, her nails digging crescents into June's palm. He didn't complain. He just kept his hand in hers and murmured things she couldn't quite hear, low, steady reassurances that anchored her when the pain tried to pull her under. The building's lobby was all marble and gold, the kind of place Selena had only seen in magazines. A doorman rushed forward the moment he saw June, already reaching for her suitcase, but June waved him off. "Call Dr. Shin," he said in English, probably for Selena's benefit. "Tell him I need him at the penthouse, now." The elevator ride was smooth and silent. Selena leaned against June's shoulder, too exhausted to care about propriety. She could feel his heartbeat through his coat, slow and steady, nothing like the frantic hammering in her own chest. The penthouse was exactly what she expected. Expensive, minimalist, cold. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, glass and steel and money. June led her to a bedroom, white walls, soft gray linens, a bed big enough for 4 people, and helped her sit down. "The doctor will be here in 10 minutes, he said. "Until then, just breathe." Selena nodded, but she wasn't sure she believed him. Everything hurt. Her back, her stomach, her head. Even her teeth ached. Another contraction rolled through her and she curled forward, gasping. June crouched in front of her, his hands bracing her knees. "Look at me." She did. "You're safe now. Do you understand? Whatever happens, you're safe." Selena wanted to believe him, but safety felt like a foreign concept, something that belonged to other people. Still, when June's hand moved to cup her cheek, his thumb brushing away a tear she hadn't realized she'd shed, something inside her cracked open. "Why are you helping me?" she whispered. June's expression shifted, something raw and unguarded flickering across his face before he locked it down. "Because no one else will." It wasn't the answer she expected, but it was honest, The doctor arrived exactly 10 minutes later, a slim man in his 50s carrying a medical bag that looked like it cost more than Selena's car. He examined her quickly, efficiently, asking questions in accented English while June stood in the corner, arms crossed, watching. "You're in early labor," Dr. Shin said finally. 3 centimeters dilated. The baby's heart rate is strong, but you're dehydrated and your blood pressure is too high. I want to monitor you here tonight. If things progress too quickly, we'll move you to a private facility. Not a hospital, Selena said again. Dr. Shin glanced at June, who nodded once. Understood. I'll make the arrangements. He left her with an IV drip, something for the pain that made her head swim, and instructions to rest. June walked him out, their voices low and serious in the hallway. Selena closed her eyes and tried to breathe. She must have dozed off, because the next time she opened her eyes, the room was dark and June was sitting in a chair by the window, his face half-shadowed. "You're still here," she said, her voice slurred from the medication. "Where else would I be?" "I don't know. This isn't your problem." June stood and crossed to the bed, sitting on the edge of the mattress. "You're wrong." "About what?" "This." He gestured vaguely, encompassing the room, the situation, her. "You think you're a burden. You're not." Selena laughed, a bitter sound that scraped her throat. "I'm a pregnant woman with no money, no job, and a husband who just threw me out on Christmas Eve. If that's not a burden, I don't know what is." June's hand found hers again, his grip warm and certain. "You're a woman who survived something most people would have broken under. That's not a burden. That's strength." She wanted to argue, wanted to tell him he was wrong, that she wasn't strong, that she'd been weak and stupid and blind for years, but the words wouldn't come. So she just held his hand and let herself believe for one fragile moment that maybe he was right. The contractions eased around midnight, spacing out enough that Dr. Shin said it was safe to sleep. Selena drifted in and out, her dreams tangled and dark. She dreamed of Minho's face, twisted with rage. She dreamed of the cold, of falling, of being alone. And every time she woke, gasping and disoriented, June was there. He didn't leave, not when she cried, not when she threw up from the medication, not when she snapped at him for no reason other than she was scared and hurting and didn't know how to process any of it. He just stayed, quiet and steady, a fixed point in the chaos. By morning, the contractions had stopped completely. Dr. Shin checked her again, his expression relieved. "False labor. Common in high-stress situations. But you need rest, proper nutrition, and no more shocks to your system. The baby's fine, but you're running on empty." Selena nodded numbly. She felt hollowed out, like someone had scooped out her insides and left nothing but a fragile shell. After the doctor left, June brought her breakfast. Rice porridge, tea, fruit cut into small, perfect pieces. She ate mechanically, not tasting anything, and tried to figure out what came next. "I need to find a place to stay," she said finally. "I can't keep imposing on you." June set his coffee down and looked at her like she'd just said something unbelievably stupid. "You're not imposing. June, you're staying here. I can't." "Why not?" "Because I don't even know you." The words burst out of her, louder than she meant. "You pick up a stranger in the snow and now you're just, what, letting her live in your penthouse? That doesn't make sense." June leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "You're right. You don't know me. But I know you." Selena blinked. "What?" "6 months ago, at that dinner, you were wearing a blue dress. Your husband spent the entire night on his phone, ignoring you. You ordered the fish, barely touched it, and left early because you said you weren't feeling well. But I saw the bruise on your wrist when you reached for your water glass." Her breath caught. She remembered that night, remembered Minho grabbing her too hard in the car, hissing at her to stop embarrassing him, remembered hiding her wrist under the table, praying no one noticed. "I wanted to say something," June continued quietly, "but you were already leaving. So I gave you my card and told myself if you ever called, I'd make sure you got out." Selena stared at him, her mind racing. "You've been waiting for me to call?" "Yes." "For 6 months?" "Yes." She didn't know what to say. Didn't know how to process the fact that this man, this stranger, had been paying attention when no one else cared. "I don't understand," she said finally. "Why do you care?" June's jaw tightened. For a moment she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he stood, crossed to the window, and spoke without looking at her. Because I know what it's like to be thrown away. The words hung in the air, heavy and sharp. Selena wanted to ask more, wanted to push, but something in June's posture told her to let it go. So she did. She finished her breakfast in silence, and when June finally turned back around, his mask was firmly in place. "You'll stay here," he said. It wasn't a question. "Until the baby comes. After that, we'll figure out next steps." "And Minho? What about him?" "He's going to come looking for me. He'll file for divorce, try to take the baby." "Let him try." There was something in June's voice that sent a shiver down Selena's spine. Not fear. Something else. Something that felt almost like hope. "You can't just make him go away," she said. June smiled, and it was the coldest thing she'd ever seen. "You'd be surprised what I can do." Over the next few days, Selena learned exactly what June Hae-jin was. He wasn't a businessman. Well, he was, but that was just the surface. Underneath, he was something far more dangerous. She pieced it together slowly, through snippets of conversation, the way people deferred to him, the phone calls he took in rapid Korean that always ended with someone agreeing to do whatever he asked. June didn't just have power, he was power. And somehow, impossibly, he was using it to protect her. Her phone buzzed constantly with messages from Minho, angry texts demanding she come home, voicemails from his mother, alternating between threats and false sweetness. But June had already anticipated it. He'd hired a lawyer, a sharp, elegant woman named Kang Mira, who walked into the penthouse like she owned it and spent 3 hours documenting every bruise, every lie, every moment of abuse Selena could remember. "We'll bury him," Mira said calmly, snapping her briefcase shut. "By the time I'm done, he won't even get supervised visitation." Selena wanted to believe her, but years of living under Minho's thumb had taught her that men like him didn't lose. They just found new ways to win. Still, as the days passed, something shifted. June didn't treat her like a victim. He didn't hover or pity her. He just existed alongside her, made sure she ate, made sure she rested, brought her books when she got bored, put on movies in English when she couldn't sleep. And when the nightmares came, when she woke up gasping, convinced Minho was standing over her, June was always there, calm and solid, reminding her she was safe. It was the kindness that broke her. One night, a week after she'd arrived, Selena found herself standing in the kitchen at 2 a.m, staring at the city lights and trying not to cry. The baby was kicking, restless and insistent, and her back ached in a way that made her want to scream. "Can't sleep?" She turned to find June in the doorway, dressed in a t-shirt and sweatpants, his hair mussed from sleep. He looked different like this, younger, softer, almost human. "She won't settle," Selena said, one hand pressed to her belly. "I think she knows I'm stressed." June crossed to the counter and started making tea without asking if she wanted any. "What are you stressed about?" "Everything." She laughed, but it came out broken. "I don't have a plan, June. I don't have money or a job or anywhere to go after the baby comes. I'm completely dependent on you, and I hate it. I hate feeling like this." June handed her a mug of chamomile tea, his fingers brushing hers. "Then stay." "I can't." "Why not?" "Because this isn't my life." The words burst out of her, raw and desperate. "This penthouse, the lawyer, the doctor who makes house calls, none of this is mine. It's yours. And eventually you're going to get tired of playing savior, and I'll be right back where I started." June set his own mug down and stepped closer, close enough that Selena could feel the heat radiating off his body. "You think I'm playing? I don't know what you're doing. I'm keeping you safe." His voice was low, almost dangerous. "I'm making sure that bastard never touches you again. And when the baby comes, I'm going to make sure she has everything she needs. That's not playing, Selena. That's a promise." Selena's throat tightened. "Why?" "Because you deserve better than what he gave you." "You don't even know me." "I know enough." They stood there, inches apart, the air between them charged with something Selena didn't have a name for. She should step back, should put distance between them. But she didn't. She just looked up at June and saw something in his eyes that made her heart stutter. "I'm broken," she whispered. "So am I." And then, before she could think better of it, Selena closed the distance and kissed him. It wasn't soft. It wasn't sweet. It was messy and desperate, fueled by fear and loneliness and the overwhelming need to feel something other than pain. June froze for half a second, Then his hands came up to frame her face, tilting her head to deepen the kiss. For a moment, everything else fell away. Minho, the baby, the uncertain future, none of it mattered. There was just this, the warmth of June's mouth, the steady pressure of his hands, the way he kissed her like she was something precious. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Selena pressed her forehead to his chest and tried to calm her racing heart. "That was a mistake," she said, but she didn't move away. "Probably." "I'm sorry." June's hand came up to cradle the back of her head, his fingers tangling in her hair. "Don't be." They stood like that for a long time, wrapped in each other, until the tea went cold and the city outside started to wake. And when June finally walked her back to her room, his hand never left the small of her back, a silent promise that she wasn't alone. Not anymore. The kiss changed things, even though neither of them said it out loud. Selena woke the next morning to find June already gone, a note on the kitchen counter saying he had business to handle and would be back by evening. The apartment felt too big without him, too quiet, and she hated that she noticed. She spent the day trying to distract herself, reading, watching terrible daytime television, rearranging the clothes in her suitcase, even though there was a perfectly good closet she could use. But every time she caught herself looking at the door, waiting for the sound of his key in the lock, she felt a twist of something uncomfortably close to longing. This wasn't supposed to happen. She wasn't supposed to feel anything for him beyond gratitude. But the memory of his mouth on hers, the way his hands had cradled her face like she might break, kept circling back no matter how hard she tried to push it away. Her phone buzzed. Another message from Minho. "You can't hide forever. I know people. I'll find you." Selena deleted it without reading the rest. There were 12 more just like it, each one angrier than the last. His mother had started calling from different numbers, leaving voicemails that swung wildly between threats and desperate pleas for Selena to stop being dramatic and come home. As if she were a child throwing a tantrum instead of a woman who'd been shoved into the street while 9 months pregnant. She blocked the latest number and tossed her phone onto the couch. The baby kicked, hard enough to make Selena gasp. She pressed a hand to her belly and felt the shape of a tiny foot pushing against her palm. "I know," she murmured. "I'm stressed. I'm sorry." The intercom buzzed, making her jump. For a moment, panic seized her. Minho had found her. Somehow, he'd tracked her down, and now he was downstairs ready to drag her back. "Ms. Vale?" The doorman's voice crackled through the speaker, polite and professional. "There's a delivery for you." Selena's heart was still hammering when she opened the door to find a young woman holding 3 large shopping bags emblazoned with the logo of an expensive maternity boutique. "I'm sorry, there's been a mistake," Selena started, but the woman just smiled and walked past her into the apartment. "No mistake. Mr. June arranged everything. He said you'd need clothes that actually fit." She set the bags on the dining table and started pulling out items: soft sweaters, maternity jeans, dresses that looked comfortable and expensive. "He wasn't sure about sizes, so I brought a range. Anything that doesn't work, I can exchange." Selena stared at the growing pile of clothing, her throat tight. "He didn't have to do this." "He was very insistent." The woman's smile turned knowing. "He also said to tell you that if you try to refuse them, he'll just buy more." Despite everything, Selena laughed. It sounded rusty, like she'd forgotten how. That sounds like him. After the woman left, Selena tried on a few pieces, startled by how good it felt to wear clothes that weren't threadbare or stretched out from years of use. The sweater was cashmere, impossibly soft against her skin. The jeans had an actual support panel that didn't dig into her belly. She caught her reflection in the bedroom mirror and barely recognized herself. She looked almost normal, almost like a woman who had her life together. The illusion shattered when her phone rang. Unknown number. She should have let it go to voicemail, but something made her answer. "Selena." Minho's voice slithered through the speaker, smooth and cold. "We need to talk." She should have hung up, should have blocked the number immediately, but her thumb froze over the screen. "There's nothing to talk about," she said, hating how unsteady her voice sounded. "Really?" "Because I think there's a lot to discuss. Like where you've been hiding, who you've been hiding with." He paused, letting the implication sink in. June Hae-jin. Interesting choice. Selena's blood went cold. "How did you—" "I told you. I know people. And people talk." His voice hardened. You think you can just run off with my child and shack up with some gangster? That's not how this works, Selena. That baby is mine, legally mine, and when she's born, I'm taking her. You threw me out, Selena said, her voice shaking with rage. You threw me into the street in the middle of winter while I was pregnant. You don't get to claim her now. I was angry, you pushed me, but we can work through this. Come home and we'll forget this whole thing ever happened. No. No? Minho laughed, a sound like breaking glass. You don't get to tell me no. You're my wife. That's my child. And if you don't come back willingly, I'll make sure every court in Seoul knows you abandoned your marriage to sleep with a criminal. The line went dead. Selena stood there, phone still pressed to her ear, her whole body trembling. She wanted to throw the phone across the room, wanted to scream, wanted to break something. Instead, she sank onto the edge of the bed and tried to remember how to breathe. That was how June found her 20 minutes later, sitting in the growing dark, staring at nothing, her phone clutched in white-knuckled hands. He didn't ask what was wrong. He just crossed the room, took the phone from her gently, and set it on the nightstand. Then he sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched, and waited. He knows I'm here, Selena said finally. Minho. He called me. He said he's going to take the baby. He said, her voice cracked. He said he'll tell everyone I'm sleeping with you that I abandoned my marriage. He'll make me look like... He can say whatever he wants, June said quietly. It won't matter. How can you say that? He has lawyers, money, connections. So do I. Selena turned to look at him, really look at him. In the dim light, June's face was all sharp angles and shadows, his expression unreadable. But there was something in his eyes, something dark and dangerous and absolutely certain. What are you going to do? She asked. Whatever it takes. June, he threatened you. June's voice was soft, almost conversational, but there was steel underneath. He threatened your baby. That was a mistake. You can't just... I don't want you to hurt him. I don't want that on my conscience. June's mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. I'm not going to hurt him, Selena. I'm going to erase him. Before she could ask what that meant, June's phone rang. He answered in Korean, his tone clipped and businesslike, then stood and walked to the window. Selena caught fragments of the conversation, numbers, names she didn't recognize, something about property transfers and frozen accounts. When he hung up, he looked almost satisfied. What did you just do? She asked. Made a few calls. He slipped the phone back into his pocket and turned to face her. Your husband's family business is heavily leveraged. They've been borrowing against projected earnings for the last 3 years, gambling that a few key contracts would come through. As of 20 minutes ago, those contracts are off the table. Selena's eyes widened. You can do that? I know the people who award those contracts. They owe me favors. June's expression didn't change. By the end of the week, your husband's family will be scrambling to cover their debts. They won't have time to worry about custody battles. Selena didn't know what to say. The sheer scope of what June had just done, the casual way he'd wielded that kind of power, should have terrified her. Instead, she felt something closer to relief. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. This is just the beginning. Over the next few days, Selena watched June dismantle Minho's life with surgical precision. It started small, canceled reservations, delayed shipments, minor inconveniences that could be explained away as bad luck. But then the real damage began. Business partners suddenly remembered prior commitments. Investors pulled out of deals. The permit for Minho's father's new development project got tangled in bureaucratic red tape that would take months to untangle. Mira, the lawyer, stopped by with updates that made Selena's head spin. We've documented 18 separate instances of financial misconduct in your husband's business dealings. Nothing overtly illegal, but enough to raise questions with the right people. I've also filed a restraining order. If he comes within 100 meters of you, he'll be arrested. He'll fight it, Selena said. Let him. Mira's smile was razor sharp. Every time he fights, he makes himself look worse. And we have evidence he can't refute. The hospital records from when you fell down the stairs. The text messages. Witness statements from neighbors who heard him screaming at you. By the time we're done, he won't have a leg to stand on. After Mira left, Selena found June in his office. A sleek, minimalist space dominated by floor-to-ceiling windows and a desk that probably cost more than her old apartment. He was on the phone, speaking in rapid Korean, but he held up a finger when he saw her wrapping up the call. "You're burying him," Selena said. It wasn't a question. "Yes." "Why?" June leaned back in his chair, studying her. "Because he hurt you. Because he's trying to take your daughter. Because men like him don't stop unless you make them. And you're good at making people stop. Very good." Selena should have been disturbed by that. Should have been horrified by the ease with which June wielded violence, not physical, but financial and social, which could be just as devastating. But standing there in his office, watching him watch her with those dark, unreadable eyes, all she felt was safe. "I'm not a good person, Selena," June said quietly. "I've done things you don't want to know about. Hurt people who probably deserved it, and some who didn't, but I keep my promises, and I promised you'd be safe." "I know. Do you?" He stood and crossed to where she was standing, stopping just close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. "Because once we do this, once we go after him the way I'm planning, there's no going back. He'll know it was me, and that will put you in the crossfire." "I'm already in the crossfire," Selena said. "At least this way, I'm not alone." Something shifted in June's expression, something raw and almost vulnerable. For a moment, Selena thought he might kiss her again. Instead, he reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her cheek. "You're not alone," he said softly. "Not anymore." That night, Selena couldn't sleep. The baby was restless, shifting and kicking, making it impossible to find a comfortable position. She tried lying on her side, propped up with pillows the way Dr. Shin had recommended, but it didn't help. Eventually, she gave up and wandered into the living room, drawn by the glow of the city lights. June was there, standing by the window with a glass of whiskey in his hand. "Can't sleep either?" Selena asked. "Never could." He glanced at her, his expression softening slightly. "You should be resting." "I know. She has other ideas." Selena pressed a hand to her belly, feeling the baby's somersault. "I think she's training for the Olympics." June's mouth twitched, almost a smile. "She'll be strong, like her mother." "I'm not strong. You left. That takes strength." "I was thrown out. That's not the same thing." "But you didn't go back." June set his glass down and turned to face her fully. "Even when he called. Even when he tried to manipulate you. You didn't go back." Selena looked away, uncomfortable with the admiration in his voice. "I didn't have anywhere else to go. You could have gone to a shelter, called family, found some way to manage on your own." June took a step closer. "But you called me. Why?" "I don't know." It was a lie, but she wasn't ready to say the truth out loud. Wasn't ready to admit that even 6 months ago, at that awful dinner party, she'd felt the pull of June's attention like gravity. That when he'd looked at her, really looked at her, she'd felt seen for the first time in years. "Liar," June said, but there was no heat in it, just something that sounded almost like amusement. "Fine. You want the truth?" Selena's voice came out sharper than she meant. "I called you because you were the only person who ever noticed. The only one who saw what was happening and offered to help. And maybe that makes me desperate or stupid or—" June kissed her. It was different from the first time. Slower, more deliberate, like he was trying to memorize the shape of her mouth. His hand settled on her hips, careful of her belly, and Selena found herself leaning into him, her fingers curling into the fabric of his shirt. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, June rested his forehead against hers. "You're not desperate," he said quietly, "and you're not stupid. You're just tired of being hurt. Aren't we all? Some of us more than others." They stood like that for a long moment, wrapped in each other, the city sprawling out beneath them. Then the baby kicked, hard enough that June felt it against his stomach, and he pulled back, startled. "She's strong," he said, something like wonder in his voice. "She's annoying," Selena corrected, but she was smiling. "She only does this at 2 in the morning when I'm trying to sleep." "Smart kid, already knows how to get attention." Selena laughed, and it felt good. Natural. Like maybe, somewhere in the middle of all this chaos, she was starting to remember how to be a person instead of just a collection of wounds. June's phone buzzed, shattering the moment. He glanced at the screen, his expression darkening. "What is it?" Selena asked. "Your husband." June's voice was flat, emotionless. He just posted something online. He handed her the phone, and Selena felt her stomach drop. It was a photo of her, one Minho had taken months ago, during a rare good day when they'd gone to the park. She was smiling, her hand resting on her still small belly, looking happy. The caption made her want to vomit. "Please help me find my wife. She's 9 months pregnant and suffering from severe mental health issues. If you see her, please contact me immediately. I'm worried for her safety and our unborn child's." Below the post, sympathetic comments were already piling up. People she didn't know offering prayers, promising to keep an eye out, calling her a poor thing who clearly needed help. "He's making me look crazy," Selena whispered. "Yes. People will believe him. They'll think I'm unstable, that I'm a danger to the baby." "Selena." June took the phone back and set it aside. "Look at me." She did, her vision blurring with tears. "This is what he does," June said. "He controls the narrative. Makes himself look like the victim so no one questions him. But we have documentation, we have evidence, and in 24 hours we're going to release it all." "What do you mean?" "Mira's been building a case, not just for the divorce, for everything. The abuse, the fraud, the affairs. Tomorrow morning, it all goes public. Every dirty secret your husband's been hiding, every lie he's told. By the time we're done, no one will believe a word he says." Selena wanted to feel relieved. Instead, all she felt was tired. "This is never going to end, is it? He's never going to stop." "He will." June's voice was absolute, certain. "Because I'm going to make him." The next morning, Mira's office released a statement. It was clinical, precise, devastating. Copies of hospital records showing injuries consistent with domestic violence. Screenshots of text messages where Minho threatened Selena, called her worthless, told her she was lucky anyone would put up with her. Financial records proving he'd been siphoning money from their joint account to fund his affair. And photos, dozens of them, documenting bruises, split lips, the kind of damage that couldn't be explained away. The internet exploded. Within hours, Minho's sympathetic post had been buried under a wave of outrage. People who'd offered prayers were now calling for his arrest. The companies he worked with started distancing themselves, issuing statements about their commitment to supporting victims of domestic violence. His mistress, apparently realizing she'd hitched herself to a sinking ship, gave an interview claiming she'd had no idea he was married. Selena watched it all unfold from the safety of June's penthouse, her phone buzzing constantly with messages from people she hadn't spoken to in years. Old friends who'd ghosted her when Minho started isolating her were suddenly reaching out, offering support, acting like they'd been there all along. She blocked most of them. "How do you feel?" June asked, appearing in the doorway with a cup of tea. "I don't know." Selena took the mug, grateful for something to do with her hands. "Relieved, angry. I thought I'd feel vindicated, but mostly I just feel empty." "That's normal." June sat beside her on the couch, close but not touching. "You spent years living in survival mode. Now that the immediate threat is gone, your brain doesn't know what to do with itself." "You sound like you've been through this before." "I have." Selena glanced at him, curious. "What happened?" For a long moment, June didn't answer. Then he leaned back, his gaze fixed on some point in the distance. "My father," he said quietly. "He was a businessman, legitimate on paper, but underneath he ran half the illegal operations in Seoul, and he was good at it, good at making people think he was respectable while he buried anyone who got in his way." "What happened to him?" "I buried him first." June's voice was emotionless, matter-of-fact. "Took over his empire, cleaned up the worst of it, made it almost legal. But some things you can't wash away, no matter how hard you try." Selena didn't know what to say. She reached out, her hand covering his, and felt his fingers curl around hers. "I'm not a good man, Selena," June said again. "I've hurt people. I'll probably hurt more before this is over. But I won't hurt you. And I won't let anyone else hurt you either." "I know." "Do you?" "Yes." And she did. Whatever June was, criminal, kingpin, monster, he'd been kinder to her than anyone in years. He'd given her safety when she had none, protected her when she couldn't protect herself. That had to count for something. They sat like that for a while, hands clasped, watching the city wake up outside the window. And when June finally stood to take a phone call, Selena found herself already missing the warmth of his presence. 3 days later, Minho tried to visit. Selena was in the kitchen when the doorman called. his voice tight with barely concealed alarm. "Ms. Vale, there's a man here claiming to be your husband. He's demanding to see you. Should I call security?" "Yes," Selena said, her heart hammering. "And call June." "Already did. He's on his way." Mino started shouting before security could escort him out. Selena could hear him through the intercom, his voice rising in pitch, sounding more unhinged with every word. "You can't keep her from me. That's my wife. My child. You have no right—" Then June's voice, cold and calm. "You're trespassing. Leave now, or I'll have you arrested." "You think you can steal my family? You think you're untouchable?" "I don't think, I know." There was a scuffle, muffled shouting, then silence. Selena stood frozen in the kitchen, her hands braced against the counter, trying to steady her breathing. The baby was moving, agitated by Selena's racing pulse, and she pressed a hand to her belly, whispering reassurances she didn't quite believe. When June walked through the door 10 minutes later, his knuckles were bruised. "What did you do?" Selena asked. "Nothing he didn't deserve." June went to the sink and ran cold water over his hand. "He's gone. Security has his photo. He won't get past the lobby again." "You hit him." "He took a swing at me first." June dried his hands and turned to face her. "I just made sure he didn't get a second chance." Selena should have been upset, should have told June that violence wasn't the answer, that they needed to handle this through legal channels. But all she felt was a fierce, savage satisfaction. "Good," she said. June smiled, and it was the most genuine expression she'd seen from him yet. "You're learning." That night, Selena went into labor for real. It started the same way as before, a dull ache in her lower back that gradually spread around to her stomach. But this time, the contractions didn't stop. They came in waves, closer and closer together, until Selena was doubled over on the bathroom floor, gasping. "June," she called out, her voice weak. "June, I need—" He was there before she could finish, scooping her up and carrying her to the car. Dr. Shin was already waiting at the private clinic, his face calm and professional as he examined her. "You're at 6 centimeters, he said. "We need to move quickly." Everything after that was a blur of pain and fear, and June's hand gripping hers so tightly she thought her bones might break. But she held on, and he held on, and somewhere in the middle of it all, Selena realized she wasn't alone anymore. She had someone fighting for her, and that made all the difference. The pain tore through her in waves, each one worse than the last. Selena gripped the edge of the hospital bed, her knuckles white, her whole body trembling with the effort of staying conscious. Dr. Shin was saying something about dilation and timing, his voice calm and clinical, but it sounded like he was underwater. All she could focus on was the crushing pressure, the way her body felt like it was being split apart from the inside. "Breathe, Selena," June said, his hand solid and warm around hers. "Just breathe." "I am breathing," she gasped out, then bit back a scream as another contraction hit. "It's not helping." "I know, but you're doing it anyway." She wanted to snap at him, wanted to tell him to shut up with his useless platitudes, but the pain stole her words. Instead, she squeezed his hand so hard she felt something pop, though whether it was her knuckle or his, she couldn't tell. 8 centimeters, Dr. Shin announced. "We're close." Close. The word felt like a sick joke. Nothing about this felt close to over. It felt endless, a stretching eternity of pain that swallowed everything else. Selena closed her eyes and tried to remember why she'd wanted this baby in the first place, back when pregnancy seemed like a good idea instead of a nightmare she couldn't wake up from. "Look at me." She opened her eyes to find June's face inches from hers, his expression fierce and focused. "You're going to get through this," he said. "You hear me? You're going to have this baby, and she's going to be perfect, and you're going to be fine." "You don't know that." "Yes, I do." Another contraction ripped through her, and Selena screamed. She didn't care who heard, didn't care about dignity or composure. The pain was too big to contain, too brutal to suffer in silence. So she screamed, and June held her hand, and Dr. Shin kept talking in that maddeningly calm voice about progress and positioning. "Almost there," Dr. Shin said. "1 more centimeter." "I can't," Selena gasped. "I can't do this." "You're already doing it." "I want drugs. I want an epidural. I want—" "It's too late for that." Dr. Shin's face appeared in her line of vision, kind but firm. The baby's coming too fast. But I promise you, in 20 minutes, this will all be over. 20 minutes felt like a lifetime. The contractions kept coming, each one building on the last until Selena couldn't tell where one ended and the next began. It was just pain, constant and unrelenting, and somewhere in the middle of it, she stopped fighting. She let it wash over her, through her, let her body do what it needed to do without her mind getting in the way. "That's it," Dr. Shin said. "Now push." Selena pushed. Selena. She pushed until her vision went black at the edges, until she tasted blood from biting her lip, until every muscle in her body screamed in protest. And through it all, June stayed beside her, his hand anchoring her to reality, his voice a steady stream of encouragement that she clung to like a lifeline. "You're doing great. Just a little more. Come on, Selena. You've got this." "I hate you," she gasped between pushes. "I know. This is all your fault." "How is this my fault?" "You made me feel safe enough to have her." June went quiet for a moment, and when Selena glanced at him through the haze of pain, she saw something raw and unguarded flicker across his face. Then Dr. Shin was telling her to push again, harder this time. And she didn't have space to think about what she'd just said or what it meant. The baby came all at once, in a rush of pressure and relief so overwhelming that Selena sobbed. She heard a cry, high and indignant and perfect, and then Dr. Shin was saying something about a healthy girl, and a nurse was cleaning the baby, and Selena was shaking so hard she thought she might fall apart. "You did it," June said, his voice thick. "Selena, you did it." "Is she okay?" Selena tried to sit up, but her body wouldn't cooperate. "Let me see her. I need to see her." The nurse brought the baby over, wrapped in a soft pink blanket, and placed her in Selena's arms. She was tiny, impossibly small, with a shock of dark hair and eyes that blinked up at Selena like she was trying to figure out this strange new world. Her face was scrunched and red, her fists waving in the air, and she was the most beautiful thing Selena had ever seen. "Hi," Selena whispered, her voice breaking. "Hi, baby girl. I'm your mom." The baby made a small sound, something between a whimper and a sigh, and Selena felt her heart crack wide open. All the fear, all the pain, all the months of terror and uncertainty, none of it mattered anymore. Because this, right here, was worth it. "What are you going to call her?" June asked quietly. Selena looked down at her daughter, at the perfect curve of her cheek, the delicate shell of her ear. "Lena," she said. "Her name is Lena." "Lena," June repeated, like he was testing the weight of it. "It's perfect." For a moment, everything was perfect. Selena held her daughter, June stood beside her, and the world outside the clinic didn't exist. It was just the three of them, suspended in a fragile bubble of peace. Then Selena's phone rang. June pulled it from her bag, glanced at the screen, and his expression went cold. "It's your husband." "Ex-husband," Selena's corrected automatically. The divorce papers had been filed weeks ago, even if they weren't finalized yet. "Don't answer it." But June was already swiping to accept the call, his eyes hard. "She's not available," he said, his voice flat. Minho's response was loud enough that Selena could hear it even from across the room. "Put her on the phone. Now." "No. I have rights. That's my daughter. You can't keep me from her." "Watch me." June hung up, then he powered the phone off completely and slipped it back into Selena's bag. He doesn't get to ruin this moment. But the damage was done. The bubble had burst, and reality came crashing back in. Minho knew the baby had been born, which meant he'd start making moves, filing motions, leveraging whatever connections he still had left. The fight wasn't over. If anything, it was just beginning. "He's going to come for her," Selena said, her arms tightening around Lena. "He doesn't want me, but he'll take her just to hurt me." "He won't get the chance." June's voice was absolute, certain. "I promise you, Selena, he's not taking this child." "You can't promise that. You're not her father. You have no legal claim." "Then I'll get one." Selena stared at him, her mind struggling to process what he'd just said. "What?" "Marry me." The words hung in the air between them, impossible and absurd, and somehow exactly right. "You're insane," Selena said, but her voice had no heat in it. "Probably." June moved closer, sitting on the edge of the bed. "But if we're married, I have legal standing. I can protect you both in ways I can't right now, and your ex-husband won't have a leg to stand on." That's not a reason to get married, isn't it? June, I'm not asking you to love me, he said quietly. I'm asking you to let me protect you, to let me be the wall between you and everyone who wants to hurt you. That's all. Selena looked down at Lena, who'd fallen asleep in her arms, her tiny face peaceful. She thought about Minho, about his threats, and his lawyers, and his bottomless need to control. She thought about the last few weeks, the way June had fought for her when no one else would, the way he'd stayed when it would have been easier to walk away. This is crazy, she said. I know. We barely know each other. I know. And you're a criminal. June smiled just a little. I prefer entrepreneur with flexible ethics. Despite everything, Selena laughed. It came out watery, half sob, but it was real. You're serious about this? Completely. Why? June reached out and ran a finger along Lena's cheek, his touch so gentle it made Selena's throat tight. Because I've spent my whole life taking things from people. I want to try protecting something for once. Someone. We're not a charity case. I know that. He looked up, meeting Selena's eyes. You're the strongest person I've ever met. You survived something that would have broken most people. And now you have a daughter who's going to need someone in her corner when things get ugly. Let me be that person. Selena wanted to say no. Wanted to tell him this was insane, that marriage was supposed to be about love and trust, and all those things she'd thought she had with Minho before it all turned to ash. But looking at June, at the sincerity in his eyes, she realized maybe this was better. No illusions, no false promises, just two broken people trying to protect something good. Okay, she said quietly. Okay, I'll marry you. June let out a breath, and for the first time since she'd known him, he looked almost vulnerable. You won't regret this. We'll see. They got married 3 days later in a judge's office, with Mira as the witness and Lena sleeping in Selena's arms. It wasn't romantic. There were no flowers, no music, no tearful vows, just signatures on paper and a promise to protect each other from the wolves circling outside. When the judge declared them married, June kissed Selena's forehead, chaste and careful, nothing like the kisses they'd shared before. And Selena realized that whatever this thing between them was, it had shifted into something new, something neither of them had a name for yet. Congratulations, Mira said dryly as they left the courthouse. You're now legally bound to one of Seoul's most dangerous men. How does it feel? Ask me in a year, Selena said. But the truth was, it felt safe. And after everything she'd been through, safe was all she needed. The retaliation came faster than expected. 2 days after the wedding, Minho's lawyer filed an emergency custody petition, claiming Selena was mentally unstable and living with a known criminal. The allegations were vicious and detailed. Claims that she'd abandoned her marriage for an affair, that she was exposing the baby to dangerous people, that she was an unfit mother who couldn't be trusted. Selena read the documents in June's office, her hands shaking so badly the pages rattled. This is all lies, she said. Every word of it. I know. Mira was already typing furiously on her laptop, pulling up files. And we're going to prove it. But we need to be smart about this. If we go in too aggressive, it'll look like you have something to hide. So what do? We let them make the first move. Let your ex-husband's lawyer paint you as unstable. Then we produce evidence showing he's a violent, manipulative fraud who's only interested in the baby as a weapon. The judge will see through it. And if they don't? Mira looked up, her expression hard. Then June and I will make sure they do. The custody hearing was set for 2 weeks later. In the meantime, Selena tried to build some semblance of normalcy. She learned how to change diapers, how to soothe Lena when she cried in the middle of the night, how to function on 3 hours of sleep strung together in 30-minute increments. June helped more than she expected, taking shifts when Lena was fussy, walking her around the penthouse at 2 a.m, reading parenting books like they were intelligence briefings. You're good at this, Selena said one night, watching him rock Lena to sleep. At what? Being a dad. June glanced at her, something unreadable in his expression. I'm not her dad. You're doing all the things a dad does. That's different. Is it? He didn't answer, just kept rocking Lena until her eyes closed, then carefully transferred her to the bassinet beside the bed. When he straightened, Selena caught his hand. "Thank you," she said, "for all of this. I know you didn't sign up for midnight feedings and dirty diapers." "I signed up for you," June said quietly. "Everything else comes with the package." It should have sounded clinical, transactional, but the way he said it, the way his thumb brushed across her knuckles, made it feel like something else entirely. The night before the custody hearing, Selena couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind running through every possible disaster scenario. What if the judge believed Minho's lies? What if they decided she was unfit? What if they took Lena away and she never got her back? "Stop thinking," June said from beside her. "I'm not thinking." "You're thinking so loud I can hear it from here." Selena turned her head to find him watching her, his expression soft in the darkness. "What if we lose?" "We won't. You don't know that." "I do." June shifted closer, his hand finding hers under the covers. "Because I'm not going to let it happen. Whatever it takes, Selena. I'll burn the whole city down before I let him take her from you." "That's illegal." "I've done worse for less important reasons." She should have been horrified, should have told him that violence and intimidation weren't the answer, but lying there in the dark, holding the hand of a man who'd promised to destroy anyone who threatened her child, Selena felt nothing but grateful. "I'm scared," she admitted. "I know. What if I'm not enough? What if the judge takes one look at me and decides I'm exactly what Minho says I am?" June rolled onto his side, propping himself up on one elbow so he could look at her properly. "You're a woman who survived abuse, left with nothing, and built a life for your daughter anyway. You're brave and smart and stronger than anyone I've ever met. And if that judge can't see it, then they're blind. You barely know me. I know enough." Selena's throat went tight. "Why do you care so much?" For a long moment, June didn't answer. Then he reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her cheek. "Because when I saw you that night in the snow," he said quietly, "I saw myself. Someone thrown away by people who were supposed to protect them. Someone fighting to survive when the world kept trying to break them. And I thought, if I could save you, maybe it would mean I'm not as lost as I think I am." Selena's breath caught. "You're not lost." "Yes, I am." June's smile was sad, self-aware. "But maybe with you and Lena, I can find my way back." She kissed him then, not thinking about consequences or complications, just needing to be close to someone who understood, who saw her as more than a victim or a burden. June kissed her back, slow and careful, like he was afraid she might break. And for a while, the fear receded, replaced by something warmer and infinitely more dangerous. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, June rested his forehead against hers. "Whatever happens tomorrow," he said, "we face it together." "Together," Selena agreed. The courthouse was a cold, imposing building that made Selena's stomach churn the moment she walked through the doors. Mira met them in the lobby, dressed in a sharp suit that screamed competence and control. "Remember," she said, gripping Selena's shoulders, "stay calm. Don't let him rattle you. Answer the questions honestly, but don't volunteer information. And whatever you do, don't lose your temper." "I won't." "Good. Because he's going to try to make you look unstable. That's his whole strategy." They walked into the courtroom and Selena's heart sank. Minho was already there, sitting beside his lawyer, a sharp-faced woman in her 50s who looked like she ate opposing counsel for breakfast. He looked good, rested and put together, like a concerned father instead of the man who'd thrown her into the street. When he saw her, he smiled. It was small, cruel, designed to remind her that he still had power here. Selena lifted her chin and stared right back. The judge was a stern woman in her 60s who looked like she'd seen every trick in the book and wasn't impressed by any of them. She listened to both lawyers' opening statements with a neutral expression, then turned her attention to Minho. "Mr. Park, you filed for emergency custody of your daughter, claiming the mother is unfit. Can you explain why you believe this to be true?" Minho's lawyer stood. "Your Honor, my client has documented evidence that Ms. Vale—" "Mrs. June," Mira interrupted smoothly. "She remarried." Minho's lawyer's jaw tightened. That Ms. Vale abandoned her marriage to pursue an extramarital affair with a known criminal. She's currently living with this man. exposing the infant to a dangerous environment. We have witnesses who can testify to her erratic behavior and mental instability. Witnesses? Mira's voice was sharp. You mean your client's mistress and his mother, neither of whom are credible sources? Counselor, the judge said, her tone warning. You'll have your turn. The hearing dragged on for hours. Minho's lawyer painted a picture of Selena as an unstable, vengeful woman who'd stolen his child out of spite. They brought up the fact that she'd left on Christmas Eve, framing it as abandonment rather than escape. They questioned her mental state, her living situation, her relationship with June. Through it all, Selena sat silent, her hands clenched in her lap, fighting the urge to scream. Then it was Mira's turn. She stood, cool and collected, and systematically destroyed every argument Minho's lawyer had made. She produced hospital records showing injuries Selena had sustained during the marriage. She played recordings of Minho's threatening voicemails. She showed the judge bank statements proving he'd drained their joint account to fund his affair. Your Honor, Mira said, her voice cutting through the courtroom like a blade. This is not a custody dispute. This is a man trying to punish his ex-wife for having the audacity to leave him. He has shown no interest in this child's welfare. He only wants her as leverage. That's not true, Minho burst out, half rising from his seat. I love my daughter. Sit down, Mr. Park, the judge said sharply. Minho sat, his face flushed with anger. The judge looked at Selena. Mrs. June, I'd like to hear from you directly. Why did you leave your husband? Selena stood on shaking legs. Because he was hurting me, Your Honor, and I was afraid if I stayed, he'd hurt our daughter too. Can you elaborate? He hit me, pushed me, called me names, made me feel like I was worthless. Selena's voice was steady, even though her hands were trembling. And when I got pregnant, it got worse. He said I'd gotten fat, that I was disgusting. And on Christmas Eve, when I asked him to stop seeing the woman he was cheating with, he threw me out, while I was 9 months pregnant, in the snow. The courtroom was silent. And Mr. June, the judge asked, how did you meet him? At a business dinner 6 months before I left. He gave me his card and told me if I ever needed help, I should call. So when I had nowhere else to go, I did. And your relationship with him? Selena hesitated. We're married now, but it started as him just helping me, giving me a safe place to stay, and over time it became more. Do you love him? The question caught Selena off guard. She glanced at June, who was watching her with an expression she couldn't read. I don't know, she said honestly, but I trust him, and right now that's more important. The judge made a note, then looked at Minho. Mr. Park, do you have anything to say? Minho stood, his face a mask of false concern. Your Honor, I made mistakes. I know that. But I love my daughter. I want to be in her life, and I'm asking for a chance to prove I can be a good father. By taking her away from her mother? By sharing custody. That's all I'm asking. The judge sat back, her expression thoughtful. Then she looked at both lawyers. I'll issue my decision in 1 week. Court adjourned. Selena felt the ground drop out from under her. 1 week felt like a year. Selena spent those 7 days in a constant state of low-grade panic, jumping every time her phone rang, unable to sleep more than an hour at a time. She kept Lena close, holding her daughter like someone might rip her away at any moment, which Selena supposed they might. You need to eat, June said on the 3rd day, setting a plate of food in front of her that she hadn't asked for. I'm not hungry. I don't care. Eat anyway. Selena looked up at him, ready to snap, but the expression on his face stopped her. He looked tired, the lines around his eyes deeper than they'd been a week ago. She realized he'd been carrying this weight too, watching her spiral and trying to hold everything together. Sorry, she said quietly. I'm just scared. I know. June sat across from her, his hands folded on the table. But starving yourself won't change the outcome. It'll just make you weaker when you need to be strong. I don't feel strong. You don't have to feel it. You just have to be it. Selena picked up the fork and forced herself to take a bite. The food tasted like cardboard, but she ate it anyway, mechanically chewing and swallowing while June watched. When she'd finished half the plate, he seemed satisfied and let her stop. That night, Mira called with news that made Selena's stomach drop. Minho's lawyer filed an addendum to their petition, Mira said, her voice tight. They're claiming you fled the jurisdiction with the intent to hide the baby from her father. They're asking the judge to issue a temporary custody order placing Lena with Minho until the investigation is complete. Investigation? Selena's voice came out strangled. What investigation? They're accusing you of parental kidnapping. It won't stick. You had every right to leave. But it muddies the water. Makes you look evasive. This is insane. I know. But we need to be prepared for the possibility that the judge might grant supervised visitation while the case is pending. No. The word came out sharp. Absolute. He's not seeing her. I don't care what the judge says. Selena, he threw me out, Mira. He didn't want her. He didn't want either of us. And now he's going to play concerned father because it makes him look good? No. I won't let that happen. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then Mira said carefully, if you violate a court order, you lose all credibility. They'll paint you as exactly what Minho says you are, unstable and unwilling to cooperate. Is that what you want? Selena closed her eyes, her free hand pressed to her forehead. No. Then we play this smart. We let the process work, and we trust that the judge will see through his act. After Mira hung up, Selena sat in the dark living room, Lena asleep in her arms, and tried to remember how to breathe. She felt June before she saw him, his presence solid and grounding as he sat beside her. I heard, he said quietly. I can't do this. Selena's voice broke. I can't hand her over to him, even for supervised visits. What if he takes her and runs? What if... He won't. You don't know that. Yes, I do. June's hand covered hers, warm and certain. Because I'll be watching. Every minute of every visit, if it comes to that. And if he tries anything at all, I'll make sure he regrets it. You can't be there. The court won't allow it. The court doesn't need to know. Selena looked at him, at the cold determination in his eyes, and felt something loosen in her chest. You'd do that? I'd do worse. She believed him. And maybe that should have scared her, the casual way June talked about violence and surveillance. But right now, it was the only thing keeping her from falling apart completely. The call came on day 6. Selena was feeding Lena when her phone rang, Mira's name flashing on the screen. Her hand shook so badly she almost dropped the bottle. Tell me, she said, not bothering with pleasantries. The judge issued her ruling early. Mira's voice was neutral, impossible to read. She's denying the emergency custody petition. Selena's knees went weak. She sank onto the couch, clutching Lena tighter. She's denying it? Completely. She said Minho failed to provide credible evidence that you're an unfit mother. She also noted that his claims of parental kidnapping are baseless, given that you left due to domestic violence and he made no attempt to find you until after the baby was born. So I keep her? You keep her. There was a pause. But there's a condition. Of course there was. What? Minho gets supervised visitation, 2 hours, twice a week, at a neutral location with a court-appointed supervisor present, starting next week. The relief Selena had felt a moment ago curdled into something bitter and sharp. He doesn't deserve that. I know. But it's better than joint custody. And the supervisor will document everything. If he steps out of line even once, we can use it to terminate his rights completely. Fine. The word tasted like ash. Fine. He can have his 2 hours. When she hung up, June was standing in the doorway, his expression unreadable. You heard? Most of it. He crossed the room and sat beside her, his presence steadying. This is good news, Selena. You won. It doesn't feel like winning, because you wanted him gone completely. I get it. But this is progress, and progress is enough for now. Selena looked down at Lena, who'd fallen asleep mid-feeding, her tiny face peaceful. I don't want him anywhere near her. I know, but you don't have a choice. June's hand found hers, his grip firm. So we make the best of it. We follow the rules, document everything, and wait for him to screw up. Because he will. Men like him always do. The first supervised visit was scheduled for the following Tuesday at a family services center across town. Selena spent the days leading up to it in a state of barely controlled anxiety, snapping at June over nothing, crying at random moments, unable to focus on anything for more than a few minutes. You're going to make yourself sick, June said the night before, finding her pacing the living room at 2 in the morning. I can't sleep. I noticed. He took her by the shoulders, turning her to face him. Listen to me. Tomorrow, you're going to walk in there, hand Lena over to the supervisor, and leave. You're not going to engage with Minho. You're not going to give him the satisfaction of seeing you fall apart. You're going to be calm, polite, and completely in control. Can you do that? I don't know. Yes, you can. Because you're stronger than he is. And deep down, he knows it. That's why he's doing this. Because he needs to feel like he still has power over you. Don't give it to him. Selena took a shaky breath, then nodded. Okay. The Family Services Center was a cheerful building painted in soft yellows and blues, designed to look welcoming and non-threatening. Selena hated it on sight. She carried Lena inside, June a silent presence at her back, and tried not to think about what was about to happen. Minho was already there, sitting in the waiting area with a fake smile plastered on his face. When he saw Selena, his eyes flicked to June, and something dark passed across his expression before he locked it down. Selena, he said, standing, thank you for bringing her. Don't, Selena said, her voice flat. Just don't. The supervisor, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, stepped forward. Mrs. June, I'll take the baby now. You can wait here, or you're welcome to leave and return in 2 hours. Selena's arms tightened around Lena instinctively. The supervisor's expression softened. I promise, she'll be safe. I won't let her out of my sight. It took everything Selena had to hand Lena over. The moment her daughter left her arms, she felt like she'd been hollowed out, every protective instinct screaming at her to grab Lena back and run. But June's hand pressed against the small of her back, grounding her, and she forced herself to step away. 2 hours, the supervisor said gently. I'll call if there are any problems. Selena nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Then she turned and walked out of the building before she could change her mind. The 2 hours were the longest of Selena's life. She and June sat in a coffee shop across the street, Selena staring at her untouched drink while June scrolled through his phone. Every few minutes, she checked the time, willing it to move faster. She's fine, June said without looking up. You don't know that. The supervisor has your number. If something was wrong, she'd call. What if he says something to her? What if he tells her I'm a bad mother, or she's 3 weeks old, Selena. She doesn't understand language yet. But she'll feel it. Babies can sense things. June finally looked up, his expression somewhere between exasperated and fond. You're spiraling. I'm allowed to spiral. You are. But it's not helping. He reached across the table and took her hand. Breathe. In and out. Focus on that. Selena tried. But every breath felt like it was being dragged through broken glass, and by the time her phone finally rang, she was ready to crawl out of her own skin. Mrs. June? The supervisor's voice was calm, professional. You can come pick up Lena now. Is she okay? She's perfect. A little fussy toward the end, but that's normal. Selena was out the door before the supervisor finished speaking, June close behind. They made it back to the center in under 3 minutes, and when the supervisor brought Lena out, Selena grabbed her daughter and held her so tightly that Lena squirmed in protest. How did it go? Selena asked, even though she wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. The supervisor hesitated. Mr. Park was attentive. He held her, talked to her, seemed genuinely interested, but there were a few moments where he became frustrated when she cried. Nothing concerning, but I made notes. What kind of frustrated? He raised his voice once, told her to stop crying. I redirected him, and he apologized. Like I said, nothing overtly inappropriate, but worth documenting. Selena's jaw tightened. Of course, Minho couldn't even pretend to be patient for 2 hours. Of course, he'd gotten angry at a 3-week-old baby for doing what babies do. Thank you, she managed, for watching her. It's my job. The supervisor smiled. See you Thursday. In the car, Selena held Lena and tried to calm the rage building in her chest. June drove in silence, occasionally glancing over but not pushing her to talk. He yelled at her, Selena said finally. I know. She's 3 weeks old, and he yelled at her for crying. I know. If I'd done that, they'd take her away. But because he's her father, it's just a note in a file. June's hands tightened on the steering wheel. The supervisor documented it. That's what matters. One incident might not be enough. But if he keeps doing it, we'll have a pattern. And patterns are what win custody cases. I don't want to wait for a pattern. I want him gone now. So do I. June's voice was quiet, dangerous. But we do this the right way, for Lena's sake. Selena knew he was right, but it didn't make the anger any easier to swallow. The visits continued, each one a fresh exercise in torture. Selena would hand Lena over, spend 2 hours in agony, then get her back and hold her like she'd been returned from war. The supervisor's reports were always the same. Minho was trying, but his patience was thin, and he struggled when Lena was difficult. After the 4th visit, Mira called with news that made Selena want to throw her phone across the room. Minho's filed a motion to increase his visitation time, Mira said. He's claiming the current arrangement is insufficient for him to bond with his daughter. He wants overnights. Absolutely not. I agree, and I'm going to fight it. But you need to be prepared for the possibility that the judge might grant it. She's 2 months old, Mira. She's still nursing. How is he supposed to take care of her overnight? He'll argue that formula is an option, and that you're using breastfeeding as a way to exclude him from Lena's life. That's insane. That's family court. Mira's voice was grim. But we have ammunition. The supervisor's reports show he's struggling with even short visits. I'll use that to argue he's not ready for overnights. It's not a guarantee, but it's something. After she hung up, Selena found June in his office, staring at his computer screen with an expression that made her stomach drop. What? She asked. Your ex-husband just made a mistake. June turned the laptop so she could see. A big one. On the screen was a bank statement, Minho's personal account. Selena didn't understand most of the numbers, but June pointed to a series of transactions highlighted in red. He's been moving money, June said, large amounts, into offshore accounts. Is that illegal? Depends on where the money came from. But combined with the fraud allegations we've already documented, it's enough to get financial regulators interested. And once they start digging, they're going to find a lot more than hidden money. What are you saying? June leaned back in his chair, his expression cold and satisfied. I'm saying your ex-husband is about to have much bigger problems than a custody battle. And when he does, his lawyer is going to advise him to drop the case before it makes things worse. You did this. It wasn't a question. I expedited an existing investigation. That's all. June, he tried to take your daughter, Selena. He doesn't get to walk away clean. She should have felt guilty. Should have told him this was going too far, that they needed to win the right way. But looking at Minho's bank records, at the proof of his corruption laid out in neat rows, all Selena felt was vindicated. How long until it blows up? She asked. 2 weeks, maybe less. June closed the laptop. By the time the next custody hearing rolls around, he's going to have far more pressing concerns than visitation rights. He was right. 10 days later, news broke that the company Minho worked for was under investigation for tax fraud and embezzlement. Within hours, Minho's name was splashed across financial news sites, his photo accompanying articles about corporate corruption and white-collar crime. His family's business partners started distancing themselves. Investors pulled out. And Minho himself went radio silent, presumably huddled with lawyers trying to figure out how to keep himself out of prison. The motion for overnight visitation was quietly withdrawn. Mira called, her voice triumphant. He's done. His lawyer just filed notice that they're dropping all custody claims. Minho signed away his parental rights in exchange for you agreeing not to pursue child support. Selena's legs went weak. She sat down hard on the couch, her hand pressed to her mouth. He's really gone? Completely. You have sole custody, no visitation, no legal claim. Lena is yours. Just like that? Just like that. Mira's tone turned knowing. I don't know what you or June did to make this happen, and I don't want to know. But whatever it was, it worked. After she hung up, Selena sat in the silence, trying to process what she'd just heard. She'd won. Not just the battle, but the entire war. Minho was out of their lives, buried under legal troubles of his own making, and Lena was safe. She found June in the nursery, standing over Lena's crib, watching her sleep. He looked up when Selena entered, his expression questioning. He's gone, she said. Signed away his rights. We won. For a moment, June didn't react. Then something in his face cracked, just a little, and he let out a breath he'd been holding for weeks. Good, he said quietly. Good. Selena crossed to him, stopping just close enough that their shoulders touched. You destroyed his life, June, his career, his reputation, his freedom. That's more than good. He tried to take your daughter. He deserved worse. Maybe. Selena looked down at Lena, peaceful and oblivious to the war that had been waged over her. But it's over now, really over. Yes. They stood there together, watching Lena sleep. And for the first time in months, Selena felt something that almost resembled peace. The threat was gone. The battle was won. And somehow, impossibly, she'd survived. But as the days passed and the adrenaline faded, Selena started to realize that winning the custody case had only been the beginning. Now came the harder part, figuring out what came next. She and June existed in a strange limbo, married on paper, but dancing around what that actually meant. They slept in separate rooms most nights, though sometimes Selena would wake to find him sitting in the chair by her bed, watching over her and Lena like a sentinel. They ate meals together, took care of the baby together, existed in the same space like two people who'd forgotten how to be apart, but they didn't talk about it. What are we doing? Selena asked one night when the silence had stretched too long and the questions wouldn't stay buried anymore. June looked up from the document he was reading. What do you mean? This, us, we're married, but we're not really married. We're living together, but we're not really together. We're raising a child, but I'm not her father. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. June set the papers aside and leaned back, his expression unreadable. What do you want, Selena? I don't know. She hated how uncertain her voice sounded. I thought once Minho was gone, everything would be clear, but it's not. If anything, it's more confusing. Because you're not running anymore. June stood and crossed to where she was sitting, stopping just in front of her. You spent so long in survival mode that now that you're safe, you don't know what to do with yourself. Is that what you think? It's what I know, because I've been there. Selena looked up at him, at the sharp lines of his face, the walls he kept so carefully constructed. What happened to you, June? Before all this, what made you so sure you were lost? For a long moment, he didn't answer. Then he sat beside her, close enough that their knees touched, and spoke in a voice so quiet she almost didn't hear it. My father was a monster. Not in the dramatic sense. He didn't beat me or lock me in closets, but he was empty, hollow. He taught me that people were tools to be used, that loyalty was a transaction, that love was a weakness that got you killed. June's hands flexed like he was fighting the urge to reach for her. I spent my whole life trying to prove I wasn't like him. But the harder I tried, the more I realized I was exactly like him. Cold, calculating, willing to hurt people if it served my interests. You're not like that. Yes, I am. He finally looked at her, and the raw honesty in his eyes made her chest ache. I've done terrible things, Selena, things I can't undo. And for a long time, I told myself it didn't matter because that's just who I was. But then I saw you in that snow, and I thought, maybe I could be different. Maybe if I could save someone, it would mean I'm not completely broken. You did save me. Did I? Or did I just drag you into my world because I was selfish enough to want you there? Selena reached out and took his hand, lacing their fingers together. You gave me a choice. Every step of the way, you gave me a choice. That's not selfish. That's the opposite. I manipulated your ex-husband's life into rubble. To protect Lena. To protect me. That doesn't make it right. Maybe not. Selena shifted closer, until she could feel the warmth of his body against hers. But it makes it human. You're not a monster, June. You're just a person who's been hurt and learned how to hurt back. That doesn't make you broken. It makes you survivor. Something in June's expression cracked, and before Selena could say anything else, he kissed her. It was desperate and raw, nothing like the careful kisses they'd shared before. This was need, pure and simple, the kind that came from months of holding back and pretending they were something other than what they were. Selena kissed him back, her hands fisting in his shirt, pulling him closer. She didn't know what this meant, didn't know where it would lead. But right now, with June's mouth on hers and his hands tangled in her hair, she didn't care. They pulled apart eventually, both breathing hard. This complicates things, June said. Everything's already complicated. Fair point. Selena rested her forehead against his. I don't know what I want yet, but I know I don't want you to leave. I'm not going anywhere. Promise? Promise. It wasn't a love confession. It wasn't a dramatic declaration, but it was real and honest, and for now, that was enough. Things didn't magically get easier after that night. If anything, they got more complicated. Selena and June existed in a constant state of almost touching, almost talking about what they were, almost crossing the line from convenience into something real. They shared meals and late-night conversations and the exhausting work of caring for an infant, but the question of what came next hung between them like smoke. Selena told herself she was fine with the ambiguity. She had Lena, she had safety, she had a man who'd burned down half of Seoul's criminal infrastructure to protect her. That should have been enough. But lying awake at 3 a.m, listening to June move around the penthouse while Lena slept peacefully in her crib, Selena couldn't shake the feeling that she was waiting for something. She just didn't know what. The answer came 6 weeks after Minho signed away his parental rights, in the form of a phone call that made Selena's blood run cold. Mrs. June? The voice on the other end was unfamiliar, male, with an edge that set off every alarm in Selena's head. This is Detective Huang with the Seoul Metropolitan Police. I'm calling about your husband. Selena's stomach dropped. What about him? He's not in any trouble, but we need to speak with him regarding an ongoing investigation. Is he available? He's not here right now. Selena's mind raced, trying to figure out what this meant. What kind of investigation? I'm not at liberty to discuss that over the phone, but it's important that we speak with him as soon as possible. Can you have him contact me? The detective left a number and hung up before Selena could ask any more questions. She stood there with the phone still pressed to her ear, her heart hammering, until Lena's cry from the nursery snapped her back to reality. When June came home 2 hours later, Selena was waiting. The police called, she said without preamble. June went still. What did they say? That they need to talk to you about an investigation. They wouldn't tell me what kind. Selena crossed her arms, fighting the urge to demand answers she wasn't sure she wanted. What's going on, June? I don't know. But something in his expression said that was a lie. Did they leave a number? Selena handed him the slip of paper she'd written it on. June glanced at it, then pulled out his phone and walked into his office, closing the door behind him. Selena stood in the hallway, debating whether to follow. But before she could decide, Lena started crying again, and the moment was lost. June didn't come out of his office for 3 hours. When he finally emerged, his face was carefully blank, which Selena had learned meant he was furious about something he didn't want to discuss. He found her in the living room, Lena asleep in her arms, and sat down across from her. I need to tell you something, he said quietly, and you're not going to like it. Selena's chest tightened. What? The investigation the detective mentioned. It's not about me. It's about your ex-husband. Minho? I thought he was already under investigation for fraud. He is, but this is different. June leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. Apparently, when he realized he was going to lose the custody case, he started making threats. Against you. Against me. Against Lena. The room tilted. What kind of threats? The kind that involve hiring people to hurt you, to take Lena and disappear, to make sure I couldn't protect you. June's voice was flat, emotionless, but his hands were clenched into fists. The police picked up one of the men he contacted. He's cooperating in exchange for a reduced sentence, and part of his cooperation involves testifying that Minho solicited him to commit kidnapping and assault. Selena couldn't breathe. When did this happen? 2 weeks ago, right before he signed away his rights. June's jaw tightened. He was planning to take Lena no matter what the court decided, and if you got in the way, he was going to hurt you. But the police stopped him. No, I stopped him. June looked at her, and for the first time since she'd known him, he looked almost guilty. I found out what he was planning before the police did. I made sure the man he contacted went to the authorities instead of going through with it, and I made sure Minho knew that if he tried anything else, he wouldn't live long enough to regret it. Selena stared at him, trying to process what she was hearing. You threatened him. I did more than threaten him. I made it very clear what would happen if he came near you or Lena again, and I made sure he understood I wasn't bluffing. June, I know this isn't how you wanted things handled, but I'm not going to apologize for protecting you. His voice hardened. He was going to take your daughter and hurt you in the process. I wasn't going to let that happen. Selena should have been angry, should have told him he'd crossed a line, that violence and intimidation weren't the answer, But looking at June, at the fierce protectiveness in his eyes, all she felt was overwhelming gratitude mixed with something that felt dangerously close to love. "What happens now?" she asked. "The police want me to give a statement about the threats Minho made. They're building a case for attempted kidnapping and conspiracy to commit assault. If it sticks, he's looking at serious prison time." "Good." The word came out harder than Selena intended, but she didn't take it back. "He deserves it." "He does." June stood and crossed to where she was sitting, crouching down so they were eye level. "But this means things are going to get messy for a while. The media will pick up the story. Your name will be in the papers. People are going to ask questions." "Let them ask." Selena shifted Lena in her arms, tucking the blanket more securely around her daughter. "I'm done hiding. I'm done being afraid of what people think." Something shifted in June's expression. Pride, maybe, or admiration. "You're sure?" "I'm sure." The story broke 3 days later, and it was every bit as ugly as June had predicted. The headlines screamed about domestic violence, corporate fraud, and criminal conspiracy. Minho's face was plastered across every news site, his carefully constructed image shattered beyond repair. The media dug up old photos of Selena, from back when she was still trying to look happy, and ran them alongside articles speculating about her relationship with June. Some outlets painted her as a victim who'd finally escaped. Others implied she'd been having an affair all along, that she'd manipulated both men for her own gain. The comment sections were vicious, full of people who'd never met her passing judgment on every choice she'd made. "Don't read them," June said, finding her scrolling through yet another article at 2 in the morning. "I can't help it." Selena's voice was hollow. "They're saying I'm a liar, that I made everything up to get money from you, that I'm using Lena as a weapon. They're wrong. But people believe them." She looked up at him, her eyes burning. What if Lena grows up and sees this? What if she thinks her mother is some kind of gold digger who destroyed her father's life? June took the phone from her hands and set it aside. "Then you'll tell her the truth. You'll tell her that her father was a man who hurt you, who threatened to take her away, who cared more about control than about being a parent. And you'll tell her that you did what you had to do to keep her safe." What if she doesn't believe me? She will. Because by the time she's old enough to ask those questions, she'll know you. She'll know the kind of person you are. And that will matter more than anything some stranger wrote on the internet. Selena wanted to believe him, but the doubt lingered, a constant whisper in the back of her mind that told her she'd never be free of this, that Minho's shadow would follow her forever. The breaking point came a week later when Selena received a letter. It arrived in the mail, hand-addressed in handwriting she recognized immediately. Her hand shook as she opened it, already knowing it was a mistake but unable to stop herself. The letter was short, handwritten on expensive paper that probably cost more than Selena used to spend on groceries. "Selena, I know you won't respond to this, but I need you to know that I never meant for things to end this way. I loved you once. Maybe I still do, but you made me into someone I didn't recognize, and now I'm paying the price for it. I hope you're happy with him. I hope he gives you whatever it was I couldn't. But don't forget, you destroyed me, and that's something you'll have to live with. M." Selena read it 3 times, each word twisting the knife deeper. Part of her wanted to laugh at the absurdity of it. Minho trying to rewrite history, trying to make himself the victim even now. But another part of her, the part that still remembered loving him, felt the old guilt creep back in. "What's that?" She looked up to find June standing in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "Letter from Minho." Selena held it out, her hand trembling. "He's blaming me, saying I destroyed him." June took the letter and read it in silence. Then, without a word, he walked to the kitchen, grabbed a lighter from the drawer and set the paper on fire over the sink. They both watched it burn, the edges curling and blackening until there was nothing left but ash. "He doesn't get to do this," June said quietly. "He doesn't get to make you feel guilty for surviving him." "But he's right, isn't he? I did destroy him. Or you did because of me. Either way, he brought it on himself." June turned to face her, his expression fierce. "He hit you. He threw you out. He threatened to take your daughter and hurt you in the process. Everything that happened to him after that was a direct result of his own actions. Not yours. Not mine. His." "But no." June crossed to her, taking her face in his hands. "Listen to me, Selena. You are not responsible for what he chose to do." You're not responsible for the fact that he was abusive, or that he committed fraud, or that he tried to hire someone to kidnap Lena. Those were his choices, and the consequences of those choices are his to bear. Selena's eyes filled with tears. I just want it to be over. I know, and it will be. But you have to let go of the idea that you owe him anything, even your guilt. He doesn't deserve it. She nodded, even though part of her still didn't quite believe it. But standing there with June's hands warm against her face, Selena realized something important. She didn't have to believe it yet. She just had to keep moving forward until the belief caught up. Minho's trial started 2 months later. Selena didn't attend. Mira advised against it, saying her presence would only give the media more ammunition, and June agreed. So she stayed home with Lena, watching the coverage on the news, and trying not to think about the fact that her ex-husband was sitting in a courtroom, facing the consequences of everything he'd done. The trial lasted 3 weeks. The prosecution presented evidence of Minho's attempts to hire someone to kidnap Lena, along with documented proof of domestic violence, fraud, and a dozen other charges that had piled up over the course of the investigation. His lawyer tried to paint him as a desperate father driven to extremes by a vindictive ex-wife, but the jury didn't buy it. When the verdict came back guilty on all counts, Selena felt nothing. No relief, no vindication, no satisfaction, just a hollow kind of emptiness, like a chapter of her life had finally closed, but left a void in its wake. How do you feel? June asked, watching her stare at the television screen. I don't know. Selena turned off the TV and looked at him. I thought I'd feel something. Happy, maybe, or relieved, but I just feel tired. That's normal. June sat beside her, his presence steady and grounding. You've been running on adrenaline for months. Now that the threat's gone, your body doesn't know what to do with itself. When does it get easier? I don't know, but it does get different. Selena leaned against him, her head on his shoulder, and let herself just exist for a moment. Outside, the city lights flickered, indifferent to the small dramas playing out in apartments and penthouses across Seoul. And somewhere in a prison cell, Minho was beginning a 10-year sentence that would hopefully teach him something about consequences. But none of that mattered right now. Right now, there was just this. Selena and June and Lena, building something fragile and new from the wreckage of everything that had come before. It was Lena's first birthday that finally forced the conversation Selena had been avoiding. They'd thrown a small party, just a few of June's trusted associates and their families, Mira and her husband, Dr. Shin. Nothing elaborate, just cake and presents, and a living room full of people who actually cared. Lena had smashed her face into a slice of cake, gotten frosting everywhere, and laughed like it was the funniest thing that had ever happened. And watching her daughter, happy and healthy and completely oblivious to everything that had been sacrificed to get her here, Selena felt something crack open in her chest. After everyone left and Lena was asleep in her crib, Selena found June cleaning up in the kitchen. Thank you, she said, for today, for all of this. June glanced up, a dish towel in his hands. You don't have to thank me. Yes, I do. Selena crossed to him, stopping just close enough that she could see the exhaustion in his eyes. You didn't have to do any of this. You could have helped me that night and sent me on my way. But instead, you let me stay. You protected me. You protected Lena. And I never really thanked you for that. I didn't do it for thanks. I know, but I'm giving it anyway. She took a breath, steadying herself. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Always. What are we doing? You and me. Is this just convenience? A marriage of protection that we're both pretending is something more? Or is it real? June set the dish towel down and turned to face her fully. What do you want it to be? I asked you first. Fair enough. He was quiet for a moment, his gaze steady on hers. I told you once that I wasn't asking you to love me. And I meant it. But somewhere along the way that changed. I don't know when. Maybe it was watching you fight for Lena or seeing you refuse to break even when everything was trying to crush you. But I fell in love with you, Selena. And I know that complicates things because you married me for protection, not romance. But you asked for honesty, so there it is. Selena's breath caught. She'd suspected, maybe, but hearing him say it out loud made it real in a way that terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. I don't know if I love you yet, she said quietly. I don't know if I even know how to anymore. Minho broke something in me, and I'm still trying to figure out if it can be fixed. That's okay. Is it? Because you just told me you love me, and I can't say it back. I know. June reached out and took her hand. But I'm not going anywhere, and whenever you're ready, if you're ever ready, I'll be here. Selena looked down at their joined hands, at the calluses on his fingers from years of fighting his way through a world that had tried to destroy him. She thought about the past year, about everything they'd survived together, and she realized that maybe love wasn't something that happened all at once. Maybe it was something you built, piece by piece, through shared trauma and late-night conversations and the quiet work of learning to trust again. I want to try, she said. To be ready, I mean. I want to see if this thing between us can be more than just survival. Then we'll try. June pulled her closer until she was standing between his knees, his arms wrapped around her waist. No pressure, no expectations. We'll just see what happens. And if it doesn't work, then we'll figure it out. Together. Selena leaned down and kissed him, slow and sweet and full of possibility. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, she felt something that almost resembled hope. The months that followed were messy and imperfect and nothing like the fairy tales Selena had grown up believing in. She and June fought sometimes, about small things, like who forgot to buy diapers, and bigger things like the fact that June still occasionally did business with people who existed on the wrong side of the law. They had moments where the past crept in, where Selena flinched at a raised voice or June withdrew into himself when things got too emotional. But they also had good days. Days where Lena learned to walk and they both cheered like she'd won an Olympic medal. Days where they cooked dinner together and laughed at how terrible they both were at it. Days where Selena caught June reading to Lena, his voice soft and patient, and felt her heart expand in ways she hadn't thought possible. Slowly, carefully, Selena started to build a life that felt like hers. She enrolled in online courses, working toward the degree she'd abandoned when she married Minho. She started writing again, not anything serious, just journals and short stories, small pieces of herself she'd thought were lost forever. She made friends with other mothers at the park, built connections that had nothing to do with her past or her husband's reputation. And through it all, June was there. Not controlling or hovering, but present. Supporting her when she needed it, stepping back when she needed space, learning how to be a partner instead of just a protector. I'm proud of you, he said one night, finding her hunched over her laptop, working on an essay for her literature class. Selena looked up, surprised. For what? For this? For building something that's yours? June gestured at the laptop, the textbooks scattered across the table. You could have spent the rest of your life hiding in this penthouse, letting me take care of everything. But you didn't. You chose to fight for yourself. I'm still fighting, Selena admitted. Some days are harder than others. I know, but you're doing it anyway. That matters. On Lena's second birthday, June made a decision that surprised both of them. I'm stepping back, he said over breakfast, his tone casual but his eyes serious. From the business. The parts of it that are less than legal. Selena set down her coffee, her heart racing. What do you mean? I mean, I'm done. June leaned back in his chair, his expression calm. I've been building an exit strategy for the past 6 months, selling off assets, cutting ties with people who don't fit the life I want anymore. By the end of the year, I'll be running a completely legitimate operation. Why? Because I don't want Lena growing up thinking her father is a criminal. Because I don't want you to spend the rest of your life wondering if the police are going to show up at our door. And because, he paused, his gaze steady on hers. Because I want to be the kind of man who deserves you. And that means letting go of the person I used to be. Selena felt tears prick her eyes. You already deserve me. Do I? Yes. She reached across the table and took his hand. You saved me when no one else would. You protected Lena when her own father wanted to use her as a weapon. You've been patient and kind and everything I never thought I'd have again. So yes, June, you deserve me. And I think I might be ready to deserve you too. Something shifted in June's expression, hope, raw and unguarded. You mean that? I mean it. Selena took a breath, the words she'd been holding back for months finally breaking free. I love you. I don't know when it happened or how, But somewhere between that first night in the snow and right now, I fell in love with you. And I'm tired of being afraid to say it. June was around the table in seconds, pulling her up and into his arms. He kissed her like she was the only thing keeping him tethered to the earth, and Selena kissed him back with everything she had. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless and grinning, June rested his forehead against hers. "I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret this," he said. "I know. And I'm going to be the best father Lena could ask for." "You already are." They stood there, wrapped in each other, while Lena played in the living room and the morning sun streamed through the windows. And Selena realized that this messy, imperfect, hard-won love was worth more than all the fairy tales she'd ever believed in. Because fairy tales didn't teach you how to survive. They didn't show you what it looked like to build something real from the ashes of everything that had tried to destroy you. They didn't prepare you for the fact that sometimes the prince was a criminal with blood on his hands and a heart that had learned to love too late. But real life did. Real life taught you that love wasn't about perfection. It was about showing up day after day and choosing each other even when it was hard. It was about building trust from nothing, brick by careful brick, until you had something solid enough to stand on. And standing there in June's arms, Selena finally understood what it meant to be home. The years that followed weren't perfect. There were setbacks and hard days and moments where the past tried to claw its way back in. Selena had nightmares sometimes, dreams where Minho came back and took everything she'd built. June struggled with letting go of the control he'd relied on for so long, learning to trust that the world wouldn't fall apart if he wasn't holding it together. But they faced it together. Lena grew up strong and stubborn, with her mother's resilience and her father's quiet intensity. She never knew her biological father, and by the time she was old enough to ask questions, Minho was just a name in court documents, someone who'd contributed DNA but nothing else. Joan adopted her officially when she turned 5, in a small ceremony that made Selena cry and Lena ask why everyone was being so weird about a piece of paper. And from that day forward, there was no question about who her real father was. Selena finished her degree and started working at a nonprofit that helped domestic violence survivors navigate the legal system. It was hard, emotionally draining work that brought up memories she'd tried to bury. But it also felt right, using her experience to help others find the strength she'd needed so desperately that night in the snow. And June kept his promise. He built a legitimate empire, one that didn't rely on fear or violence. He became a name people associated with philanthropy and business innovation instead of criminal enterprise. He was still ruthless when he needed to be, still willing to destroy anyone who threatened his family. But he'd learned to channel that instinct into protection instead of control. They weren't perfect. They fought and made up and fought again. They made mistakes, said things they regretted, hurt each other in the small ways that people who love each other always do. But they stayed. And that, Selena thought, was the real lesson. Not that love conquers all, or that the right person can fix you, but that sometimes the people who save you are the ones who are just as broken as you are. That sometimes the only way forward is together, stumbling through the dark until you find something worth holding on to. Years later, when Lena asked her mother how she'd known June was the one, Selena thought about that night in the snow. About the desperate text she'd sent to a number she'd saved on a whim. About the man who'd answered, who'd looked at her like she was worth saving when she couldn't see it herself. "I didn't know," Selena said honestly. "Not at first. I just knew I needed help. And he was the only person who offered. Everything else came later." "But you love him now," Lena said. It wasn't a question. "I do. More than I ever thought possible. Even though he's not my real dad?" Selena pulled her daughter close, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "He's the realest father you'll ever have. Biology doesn't change that." And it didn't. Because in the end, family wasn't about blood. It was about the people who showed up when you needed them. The people who fought for you when you couldn't fight for yourself. The people who stayed, even when leaving would have been easier. June had given Selena more than just safety. He'd given her a second chance at life, at love, at believing that maybe she deserved good things after all. And in return, she'd given him something he'd never thought he'd have. A family, a home, a reason to be better than the man his father had raised him to be. It wasn't a fairy tale. It was better. Because fairy tales ended with happily ever after. as if love was a destination instead of a journey. But real life kept going. Real life had messy middles and uncertain futures and moments where you had to choose, over and over again, to keep loving even when it was hard. And standing in the kitchen of the penthouse that had once been a refuge and was now a home, watching June teach Lena how to crack eggs while making a mess of the entire counter, Selena realized she wouldn't trade this messy, imperfect reality for any fairy tale in the world. Because this was real, this was earned, this was theirs. And that made it perfect in all the ways that mattered.